Hello, everybody. I'm Rob Rutledge. I am here with a dear friend, Dr. David Morrison, and I'm really looking forward to this Healing in Cancer podcast. Dave and I have been friends for many a year, and you're soon to meet a very wise man who has lived a very fulfilling, continues to live a very, very fulfilling life. So it's wonderful to have you here, David.
Wonderful to be here, and thanks to you, I'm living a full life.
Yes. Actually, let's go back because part of your background, you were an Anglican
Yes.
Minister.
Yes.
And have a psychotherapy practice. Worked in the cancer center as a psychosocial specialist, what they would call a spiritual care specialist. Some people used to call them chaplain. But you've also had a cancer diagnosis that is really, informs that decision. And I'm wondering if you can be open and honest with that, those first days of getting a diagnosis and what it was like from a kind of emotional perspective.
That's such a key question because I had been teaching for 30 years, had a wonderful career as a professor in the university, and I taught many of these things in spirituality even and health, and thought, well, I'm going to, it was just wonderful. They had a huge party at the university and things couldn't be better, and it was sort of a retirement. And before I knew it, I had been traveling. I've been speaking and traveling quite a bit before that around the world. And by golly, I heard those words that just devastates millions. Yeah. David, you have cancer. And boy, was that a lonely feeling. I'd missed a couple of appointments, and then I was told, and I couldn't believe it. I'd get out with play a little golf by myself, and the tears would just come. The absolute loneliness in a family where we're very close. Even so, it wasn't nice. And I'm basically an optimistic person and stuff. And then a young doc was doing a locum coming by and saw some of the results of the biopsy and the scans and said, this Dr. Morrison shouldn't be treated. And then you went to bat for me.
I got you set up with a specialist as well. Yeah. But I do want to reflect just that is that you had this incredibly fulfilling life. You had the great insight. You have a strong spirituality. Yet hearing those words, you have cancer, David, really will bring out the natural human emotional reaction. Yeah. And my philosophy is not to suppress that. We're human. Let's feel those emotions and not run away from it. Absolutely.
And as you know, fast forward, I ended up walking the walk, and I didn't think people knew that I had cancer, but within the cancer treatment center, it was pretty soon that people would whisper, he doesn't just talk the talk, he's walked the walk.
Right, yes.
But walking the walk at the beginning simply wasn't easy. Yeah. And you've said this, and I've said this to patients, it's that time between diagnosis and active treatment. It's the loneliest, most horrible time in a person's life. No matter how optimistic they might be or what the doctors are saying. And when the healing starts, the treatment starts, boy, it's a different.
Feels so much better.
And there's so many great people there, and that's introduces you to spirituality because people are giving of the essence of themselves.
Right. There's that human connection, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's the midst of spirituality. And I just want to reflect as well is that we're given this kind of human programming when we're in the midst of the unknown. Mm-hmm. That's when we feel oftentimes most terrible. It's really, a scary place to be in when we don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then how do you work with it? Like just maybe take me through some of the, kind of your perspective from a spiritual perspective, being in that space of, God, I've just been given a prostate cancer diagnosis. I don't know what's going to happen. I feel terrible. Mm-hmm. So these are all the human things. What took you next? What was drawing your strength as you were going forward?
Well, I suppose like so many people that you see, it's that why me?
Yeah.
And then fortunately in our equipment, I had often had people read Viktor Frankl's little book, Man's Search for Meaning. That's an old one. Yeah. And I knew something about other basic philosophical questions, and yet a lot of it goes flat at that moment. And it's reaching out or having people reach out and say, look, we're in this together. It's going to be okay. And you start to go into a reservoir of what it means to be human. And I often think of, well, even my own life sometimes, life is like a three-legged stool. We pay a lot of attention to getting physically fit and eating right and doing all that. And of course, we spend gobs of money on education. Mind, we look after the mind, we look after the body, but that third leg, the spiritual part, which is as real as the body, and we've neglected it too much until now. I mean, the pioneering work that you've done, I mean, you're well known not only in Canada, but beyond Canada. And we've had, I must say, it's great fun together in so many places. But that spiritual part, when we open ourselves to discover it, that can be the strongest part. And that's really all that ultimately matters. And I know you found it, but many of your patients have too.
Right. And I think the issue that happens is that people get caught up in, the system and what's going to happen and the kind of emotions and their psyche, and it's all normal, expected stuff, but they forget about their spirituality. And I remember I was talking with one of my patients. I'd actually gone to a spirituality and health conference, and I came back on the Monday morning saying, I'm going to ask them about their spirituality in a kind of open and very respectful way. And the first woman that I saw there was 87 years old, and she was like shaking in her boots. She was really nervous, and she had a very early breast cancer. And I was jet lagged and tired. And I just thought to myself, I just want to get to the explanation section so I can settle this lady down. And I said to her, are you comfortable talking about your spirituality or religion? And it's as if she rose out of the chair and her face lit up. And she said, oh, yes, doctor. And she went on to relate how her husband had died, and she was really looking forward to seeing him in heaven. She wasn't scared of dying. And she told me the story of waking up at 6 a.m. on the day of her breast cancer surgery and having this sense that there was a presence in the room that sat down beside her in the bed, kind of patted her on the shoulder in the same way that her husband had during their life together on earth. And she was kind of transformed through just remembering, there's that third leg. What's most important to you? And some people really have a strong faith in spirituality, and they just check it at the door when they walk into the cancer center.
Absolutely.
They forget that they're connected with something bigger than that, one himself.
And it's no wonder that sometimes that part of a person's life has just dried up because it's not nourished in society. And I think what's going on today is so exciting. I have a son-in-law who's was doing this before it's been really fashionable, mindfulness training, and I still see some people, and I'll have him now this fall. He'll come in with my patient and client and have a mindfulness session with us. And our little group of therapists, we practice it too.
As well.
And here we've been at it, around for a long time. But it's right there, and it's so simple of just letting go, letting all of this other peripheral stuff go, and bringing into the finding out who we are. You asked earlier. You said I was an Anglican. Well, most of us are what we are by accident of birth, so we can't get too much on our high horse about it. And I was looking over some notes the other day, and where I where my spiritual community is, it's nominally Anglican, but I was looking on our website, and I don't think the word Anglican ever appears.
Probably more like to have mindfulness.
And you know, I've done a lot of work with the World Council of Churches and the ecumenical movement, and I've always thought, at my stage in life, I've been ordained in ministry for more than 50 years and married that long. I don't know if one offsets the other, but you know, that I've always thought ecumenism, finding one's space with others in Christianity because of accident of birth usually, but with other religions, to me is much, much more important than being an Anglican.
Right, or a particular type of Christian, or whatever else.
Or whatever. Yeah. As a matter of fact, sometimes I have difficulty now putting the label Christian because it has so much, it's so misunderstood. I know what it means for this bag of flesh and bones. But it's more important that we discover who we are. I've got a great friend in New York, a Jesuit priest, and he's written things like Zen Spirit and Christian Spirit. He's just a great leader. He's a sensei, and he and I have been friends for 45 years. And I look to him because here he is, a Jesuit, and he's thrown away all of the old language, and he just says, David, we're called not to be Christian. Jesus came to help us discover what it means to be human.
What a fullness of that.
Yeah, what a great way.
And how, and I do want to keep on riding along the tensions, though, because the tension is, you know, you had this prostate cancer diagnosis, you went through your hormone and radiation treatment, seemed to be doing very well, but, you know, there are challenges through and through and through. And I just want to know if you just kind of reflect on what was been most difficult beyond that first experience. What's challenged your spirituality as you went forward.
How direct can you be on this?
Just right from the heart.
It's also from the mind. Of course, it wasn't pleasant, but I was told to go to a prostate support group in Ottawa, where I had the initial treatment, and I thought that was an order. It was great because we shared. We shared, and so now in Charlottetown we have a very vibrant group, and it's men now. Most of the men bring their spouses or significant others, and my golly, it's a great help to us because we're not alone. You asked a question. It's been 15 years since the first diagnosis, but cancer has returned. It's the ways. And then I had collateral damage. My eyesight is going for one thing, but that's something else, I'm sure. But I can't pee and I can't see. And the urologist shakes it. I have to use a catheter all the time, and so it took its toll on flying. You have to. I almost died of sepsis a couple of times with and do you remember that wasn't pleasant, but so these things happen. And yet I play golf. Mary Lou sees where I'm going. I've got a little GPS to tell me how far to the center.
And you play it well, actually.
We had a great. Rob taught me a new word for golf. Reload. So I do that now. It's to shoot it again. But we have, in other words, life is very, very full. It's very happy. Happiness and blessedness. It's the same word, Macarius in Greek. And I think that I don't have to put on when these other things that seem to be unpleasant occur for some reason because of the spiritual part of the being. And I'm not any holier or anything than anybody else. But this, as we said before, we don't sweat this. We learn not to sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. And that when the time comes that I won't be able to live in this form anymore, I've been with such great people who have taught me in the face of the people who sell pharmaceutical, people who say, you know, this will extend life on an average of
X
2 months.
months, yeah.
And I mean, that's so foolish because it's quality of life
Yes.
rather than quantity. And I hope I keep that,
Yeah.
you know, when it comes
Yes.
to my turn. I think so.
I think you're going to.
I think we all can,
Yeah.
because it's the quality. And I've had the great privilege, as I'm sure you have. I've asked, you know, I've had people introduce them to palliative care and put them in the program,
Yeah.
and then held patients as they died, as they
Yeah.
medical people say
Yeah.
expired,
Yeah. The
as
last
they
few
died,
breaths.
and they're, with the advances we've made in pain control, they are cogent.
Yeah.
Halfway through a sentence.
Wow.
And die.
Wow.
And they're as they're looking at you and your families around, it's a life
That's
lesson.
a real blessing.
It really is, you know. And I hope that you know,
let the kind of this kind of spirit shine through. I might also want to reflect. You know, people ask me, how can you work in palliative care? How can you be an oncologist when some of your patients die? And it's actually a huge blessing. And you know, I've been taking care of a woman recently who's in that space. You know, a youngish woman, her cancer's come back. She's 2 weeks to have chemotherapy, and she can be suffering kind of the sadness of seeing her husband suffer. She can be kind of distressed from kind of the symptoms of cough and so on. But there's something else there. There's something else. There's this incredible kind of envelope of compassion and peace and spirit. And I find it really remarkable that people can hold both of those.
Yes.
That they can be suffering at a psychological level, but, you know, as they're approaching their death, there's something that's coming through, something deeper, more peaceful. It's really kind of, in some sense, miraculous to be able to hold those two things at the same time.
And it's there for everyone.
Yeah.
And once we grasp that, and we, you know, some folks have had a bit of a rough life, and sometimes they die the way they've had to live. But by and large, it's available to folks. People are afraid of the dying part. We've often, when I started, it was almost 50 years ago. The first refereed paper that I wrote appeared in print on counseling and heart surgery. And I just remember the doctor going to one of the lady where we were working and studying, and said, you know, your husband's going to die. And she said, oh, but we won't tell him because you know, we don't want to confuse it. And then he died, and he came to the wife, the widow, and said, you know, your husband was a wonderful, wonderful patient right to the very end. And she just smiled at him and said, you know, I told him right away that he wasn't going to live, but we didn't think you could handle it. So
I have a very similar story around that too.
And so it's that's where you learn from the patients. And,
right, exactly. And things have changed. And I mean, I'm hoping that people take away this idea of that open, honest conversation. And actually going into the darkness is where you find your spirituality, where the depth and strength.
You're correct. Now, society is becoming a little bit more difficult. Everywhere I turn, I find in the civil service, people are just, hey, that's poison in there. Or you find even hospitals. Yeah. Certain units are they're just, and people are being forced to put their real self on the doorknob as they enter their workplace. And so they're being deprived of their own spirituality where they are, because everything is up for grabs and becomes aggressive. And you know, just the reason it's so fresh, it was a part of a conversation today. And she said to me, she said, I'm leaving because I'm going to retire early. I just can't take this lack of spirituality.
Right.
And I said, no, let's revisit it. Yeah. Revisit it now, and let's think of what happens if you decide not to hang your spirituality. And she, of course, knows a big difference between religion and spirituality. But she says, well, maybe I can. I said, you may gift others.
Mm-hmm.
But guess whom you're really going to gift?
Right, yeah.
You know?
And to model that, right? We bring ourselves, bring our whole spirit into work in some sense.
I must say that there are still times you think there aren't any accidents. Here I had my little manuscript there, and I was going to sit down in the quietude of coming across on the ferry.
Yeah.
And I sat down, and she looked at me and said, "Do I know you?" And and then that's the conversation. I didn't get one tad bit of
writing done, but you made a difference, and maybe you know that.
And she made a difference to me too.
And maybe she'll make a difference to others too, right?
Well, we don't know. I hope so.
I hope it works out that way. So oops. I'm gonna, maybe I'll reclip you.
No, I can do that here.
Oops.
There.
Yeah, right there. Oops, daisy. So
my father was an engineer. I guess I wasn't.
There we go. It's the passionate talking, I think, is adding to it. So maybe at this point, you can share some type of reading or poem or something that's really touched you kind of along the journey.
And this came before the hospital, and in Prince Edward Island, everybody knows it. But in busy practice, and life is busy, and you have to. I often ask people, "Where is your hermit space?" You know, professionals, and I know it's something I would ask you by times. And you and I've worked together, and I'm supposedly the spiritual caregiver, and then you'll turn, "Excuse me, David, I'm going to go meditate before we speak," and
say a prayer too.
And say a prayer. But for the practical part and the depth part, keeping it simple is important. Yes. And we all know that one time a theologian whom I've read, Reinhold Niebuhr, was giving a sermon, and he ended it with sort of a doxology, and somebody picked up on it, and it became the mantra of the AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous, that whole program. And now there are people all over, friends of mine and former patients, and they have on a card in their wallet, they pull it out, or have it on the mirror in the bathroom, and they know it by heart. But I encourage them to read it, and it's the Serenity Prayer. God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And sometimes you need a little bit loading up on the wisdom. But that is taking me through all sorts of circumstances, and it's known. And there are people who are using this. They don't know it belongs to the AA movement. It's a prayer that says something to them, and they open their wallet or their purse, and they take it out and just meditate on that. And it puts everything into focus.
It's a wonderful, wonderful way. I do want to, I'm thinking about potential audience members, people who've had a Christian background and are going through this incredibly difficult experience. And that back to that major question, why did bad things happen to good people? Or where is God when there seems to be so much suffering in this moment? How do you address that? Or maybe somebody's angry at God. How do you work with a person in that situation?
Well, I told a story this morning. I was
gave a sermon,
It happened to be United Church there, and of course they say, "David, would you tell a children's story?" Well, it was sort of a busy. Oh, what's it going to be? And you think at my stage, they'd come popping there. So Mary Lou and I were on our way, and I said, I'd really like to do something that's simple, and then we thought of it. The little girl, through her friend, had found Sunday school and found a whole new dimension to her life, about God, and God became real. But her father and her family had never had anything to do with spirituality or church, and so he was mean, and he didn't want this in his house. He put a big sign on the bathroom: "God is nowhere." That's pretty tough, and that's how people feel. Ouch. When they have a diagnosis. Where's God? Why did this happen to me? And so there was the sign, and I had it with all the kiddies looking at this. And one woman near the front, she wouldn't say it. Just, "That's bad. That's bad." And so I said, and I took it and I drew a line in the word nowhere. I put down one between the
W and the H. Yeah.
And God is now here. And that seems simplistic, and perhaps it is. But when we search or open ourselves, we will find whatever it is we call God, we'll find that spiritual presence coming into us if we allow it. And sometimes it means getting rid of the ego a bit.
Right.
And that's what we learned from the Baba Singh. I happened to be in his place in India for a conference. I felt pretty damn good about a talk I had just given. And then I was ushered into his place, about 40 of us, and he looked right at me. He said, today I thought we'd have a session on how to rid oneself of ego. Well, I sure needed that. but that's
God works in mysterious ways.
But that's it in our own private time.
Yeah.
What is really important? The spirit that's all around us, to let it in so we have something to work with to make us a little deeper, more sensitive than we ordinarily are.
Yeah.
And now there are religious people. We don't poo-poo religion. Religion is often the vehicle for this.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily be the pathway for everyone.
Right.
But some of the greatest people in my life, I think of Dr. H.L. Puxley, who was the president of King's College when I was there. He introduced me to a form of meditation that I didn't even know it existed. And there are people there who are very religious. I mean, Desmond Tutu, we've worked together, and he's spiritual, very, very spiritual, in spite of that flamboyant, and that humor is real, and he's just wonderful. But he lives it all the time. And what does it do to him? It makes him not afraid. And that's why patients and physicians, the biggest thing they can learn, and I think it's a spiritual base, is to be not afraid, especially to be not afraid of yourself.
Yes.
And then we can...
And I mean, in some sense, I think the contemplation, or what I call, in some sense, the work, as maybe you pray every day, or maybe you meditate every day, you contemplate how you want to let God's love work through you. But that's the work. As you work on that, then it becomes easier and easier and easier over the years. But we have to stay with the difficult stuff in order to allow God's presence to kind of manifest in the moment.
And then when we find there are new questions that we can handle, you've heard that thing we did over in Geneva, Switzerland.
Yeah.
I still, because I've written it in different places, many people really learn to live when they know they might die.
Right.
And I don't know why it's so true, but time and time again, when people know that they might die, they don't.
Sure.
They can carry on as I have, thanks to you.
Yeah.
But it's the really learning to live that takes place in the face of a tragedy, and they find a fullness of life. And for example, anybody who's had music therapy by a trained music therapist in palliative care, I mean, I've watched people die happy.
Yeah.
With their therapist, with their music therapist. It's incredible. I don't pretend to understand it all.
But possibility is there, is the point, right? Yeah. And that there are many kind of routes to experiencing something that's bigger than oneself.
And I don't know who's your
audience,
the audience is, but again, it's behind the simple is some profound evidence-based truths.
Yes.
And one is touching, not being afraid to touch the person who is ill, subject to cultural norms, but we don't have to just touch physically. And you said it so well, to touch them, a person emotionally, to allow their fears to have a vent, to escape.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be highfalutin cancer diagnoses. Look at the families which would be healthier if one would say, I love you.
Yeah.
You know,
Simple
you,
things.
you
right?
teased me when you you heard it this evening
Yeah.
from Mary Lou.
Yeah.
But that makes all of it. It's
Exactly.
the simple things.
The simple things in life as well. So, any other kind of reflections? I mean, you worked as a spiritual care specialist for many years at the Cancer Centre. You're really being with, trying to understand, walk the walk with the people that were there. Does anything else come to mind in terms of some blocks that people run into, or perhaps a different way that they can look at the cancer experience to help them through it?
Yes, well, I was doubly fortunate in that a subset of psycho-oncology is the spirituality.
Yeah.
And so I was able to test people for anxiety and depression. So that, and things like that, that became a little bit of an entree into their lives. And there's some, I must say, there's some clergy there who shouldn't be allowed to see any kind of patient because they come along and they want to give one more injection with their religious thing. Yeah. But by and large, many spiritual care givers have been trained now.
Right.
And that makes quite a difference. What was important to me? Oh my. Again, it's this willingness to meet the patient where he or she is.
Right.
Not where you want them to be,
yes,
but where they are.
Right.
And that does transcend cultural norms.
Yes.
And so that's a good starting place. And then staying with. I know in busy practices, and you and I've spoken about this, about what it's like in a busy practice to embrace these moments.
Yeah.
And so you have to work with staff. You know, in the nursing, cancer nursing is their major textbook. And there's a chapter in there on spirituality. If every person in the healthcare system could read that and inwardly digest it, it would be there. So it's not as if we don't know what to do.
The wisdom is obviously there. And when you say that, I also hear the family member. So that loved one, whatever the relationship is, the person with a cancer diagnosis, you take them for where they're at, right? So we're not trying to change the person with the diagnosis. We're trying to understand them. I think actually part of my role as a physician and what's really therapeutic is to try to understand that person's point of view without changing anything. I simply understand, listen, respect, and just, love them. Like literally that's the role.
It sounds so simple.
It's kind of fruity as well, right?
Yeah. Just love them all to pieces. But there's one of I did some studying of Paul Tillich and the doctor in the earlier days, and love is an ontological, not ontological. It's not an emotion. The emotions carry it, but love is a principle of life which reunites that which is separate. I mean, you don't get that with your clients, but if it's in your head, that love is more than just being nice and things.
Right.
It is a life principle which reunites the separate. And that's why, as a counselor, you try to see what's left of a relationship that can start to heal. With the patient with cancer, how can they be reunited with their family? It's cancer's a family disease.
Right, no doubt. Yeah.
And I watched a senior couple. They needed permission to give each other a hug in the hospital. Well, the family was, stand off, and she wouldn't touch him, and we just had some fun together. The first thing I knew, boy, she was right in the bed with him, and they were so happy as he died. They really were. It was
scenario.
Exactly.
And the point is, it goes both ways. So I'm talking about the family member accepting the person who's had the cancer diagnosis, but the person who has the cancer diagnosis then can model that as well as loving their loved ones, like accepting their loved ones, being in that space.
Oh, it's so exciting. I've had I have one brother who died of cancer, and it was a beautiful death. As a matter of fact, the night he's older than he was older, and but we were talking the night before, and my other brother, middle brother, had died 3 months earlier. And I said, now, when you get into the beyond life with my other brother, our other brother Jack, don't you get it into your heads that you want to see me and have more fun. I said, I'm not going to participate in that. Well, the last thing I remember is him laughing and laughing and laughing. He died that night with his family around him.
Wow.
And so it talks about the humor in a good death.
Yes.
I mean, that we know it's going to happen. And then, of course, you've seen it, and I've seen it too. A poor death, a bad
someone
death.
who's really suffering.
Oh, it's just
rips your heart.
Rips your heart out. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it happens, and we still have to be with that person and with their family.
Absolutely.
Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, exactly. So, wow. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. And I'm wondering if we can conclude the podcast with you offering us some type of more Christian prayer from that kind of perspective of the cancer journey and tapping into God's love.
Yeah. Okay. Just like to mention.
Oh yeah, sorry. We'll mention that in the last part. So,
but when you ask that, it's a little reflection.
Maybe I'll show that.
There it is, witness.
Yeah,
but
I'll
it's
show it in a moment too.
But it's a journey, and the older I get, the more difficult I find to put prayer into words, and I'm called upon to do it. I love the formulary prayers. Being an Anglican, you know, they've got to sit down, and 300 years of same thing can't be wrong. But I'd like to share with you what happens now. Okay.
Wonderful.
So I'll just ask those who are there participating in this to just take a breath and feel the breath. And if you're somewhere where you can, let your feet feel the floor. So you're connecting. And as we inhale and then exhale, we just turn ourselves over to the power of the Spirit which is around us. And if we're in a group, here's what someone might say, what I would say if others in the community want me to take that leadership. Most gracious God, we give thanks that your Spirit can enter into our hearts and minds. Take away uncertainty, fear, self-centeredness, and put into that space, if you will, love, hope, blessedness, and openness, that no matter what happens to us and with us in the next hours, we are open to being better than we have been, better than we are usually called to be, better in the sense that we have fuller health, we have fuller understanding, and fuller relationships, not only with each other, but in the divine presence which encompasses us about in every moment, in every day. So be it.
Amen. Yeah. Wonderful. The evolved spirit. I just want to acknowledge the evolved spirit here. So David is writing a memoir. It's called Witness. And believe it or not, it's hard for me to believe, is that painting, which is in David's office, is the painting in this cover of the book as well.
Wasn't my choice. It was the graphic artist.
Still, it's a wonderful, wonderful painting. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to reading it. I mean,
it'll be it's in the last pains of birth.
Yes.
The joys of it. It'll be launched on October 14th.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's I'm looking forward to that. And thank you.
Well, you mentioned it a few times.
I may have made the second chapter. Anyways, I wanted to thank you so much, first of all, just for spending the time and for your great spirit in teaching me over the years as well.
Teaching you,
yeah.
Spare me.
Yeah,
we've been truly blessed.
Yeah, in many ways. So bless you.
Bless you too.
Thank you.